Hello. Today I'm going to be demoing to you an application called My Trials Tracker, and that's what it's called for short. The full name is Stem Cell Clinical Trials Tracker Application. And how we deployed it is we're using 3 Docker containers. So one Docker container runs MySQL server, which holds our My Trial database as well as all the tables in there. And then we have another Docker container that runs Spring Boot server, and that handles all of the requests that come from React.js frontend to request data from MySQL server. So Spring Boot goes and fetches the data for us, and sending SQL statements to MySQL. And then MySQL will send back data to Spring Boot. Spring Boot will process it and then send it back to React.js for the data to either be displayed on the front end, or if React.js ends up sending a request to Spring Boot to send out an SQL statement that deletes data, then that can happen too, as well as inserting data into the tables. So the third container is a React.js container, and that runs our graphic user interface on the front end. So for our app, we have 2 different roles. You can be a researcher or a patient. And so here's our front end. We can see we're going to start out as a researcher. We have some, sample login users here. So this particular researcher, Mark, he doesn't have patients in his trial who have a donor, whereas like Tippy has patients in his trial who have donors. So those particular 2 different users that we log into, they'll have like different outcomes for the patients that we see, and like what kind of functionalities we can utilize, in there. We'll see that. And then the third is testing, logging in as a patient. So we're going to start out as a researcher. So we'll do Tippy, take the password, submit. And what we can see here, there's actually multiple features. So we're going to just go into My Trials. So these are the trials, and you can see here I have the logs running for Spring Boot. And each time that we enter a new page, an SQL statement is sent from Spring Boot to MySQL, and then it gets, MySQL will send a response to Spring Boot, and then it'll eventually get up to React.js to render the data and the information on the page. So in our case, we're seeing the trial that Tippy is investigating, managing. So we can click the trial, we can see information about the trial, and we can even go to the trial's patient list. And then this is a list of all the patients who are participating in this trial. And let's say we click on patient 17, we can see their particular patient data, like what disease they have. We can see their particular trial that they're participating in, and information on that, like the title of the trial, as well as which researcher is managing that trial, as well as them. And then we see there's a few different functionalities. We can delete the patient, which we're not going to do right now. We can edit the patient profile. We can also update their donor. So what this is because we logged in as Tippy, this researcher actually has patients in his trial who have also donors. So we can click update donor, and then we can go ahead and change the name of the donor. So we can say like Eric Stan, and we can update the email to be ericstan@gmail.com, and then we can submit that. And what happens is we can see that SQL query, in this case, an update statement is sent from Spring Boot to MySQL, and then that table gets updated. So a way that we can actually see this is through using MySQL on the back end, for instance. So let's go into our Docker container. So what we'll do is we'll do a quick IT my trial DB, right? And we're gonna do bash into there, and then we're gonna jump in as MySQL root user, and then we're gonna use my trial. Okay, for my trial, we're interested in the donor table, right? So we're interested in the patient 17, right? And that patient has a donor, Eric Stan, right? So like what we can do is we can do a filter for that particular donor using, you know, the patient ID that they have. So we can do a select star from donor where then we're going to say patient ID. Each donor has a patient ID because they're linked to a particular patient. And what we can see here is, you know, that donor is, you know, their name is Eric Stan. But, you know, let's say we wanted to give this patient a new donor, you know. Let's say it's James Guzman. And, you know, we're going to make this quick update as well. We can then click the submit again. If we look at our other log, we can see another update statement was sent to MySQL, which means that that donor has been updated. So let's, you know, do that statement again. We can see that their donor has been updated. So let's continue. So what we can do next is, you know, let's look at the My Watch list. So what this shows is a researcher can track patients and their particular disease, and we can also add to the watch list. So like if we click on this, you know, bar here, we can see other diseases that we would want to add to track, you know, more patients on their particular disease. So currently we don't have, you know, solid tumors, so we can add that to the list. We can add to the watch list, and now, you know, our watch list grows as a researcher, so that's pretty cool. What else we can do? We can go into the discussion forum, you know, and create some new posts. So, you know, let's say that we're interested in brain cancer. What's the latest trials, right? And we will submit this. And then we can see, you know, the content, the researcher who submitted it, and then also we can update and delete this too. So, you know, let's say that we want to make a quick update. So, you know, that's just notifying us. Something, you know, like another question came up, how many people are suffering from this illness? And we can submit that. We can see that it updates the post. Okay, now we're going to go check out the researcher list. This is a list of all the researchers, you know, so every researcher now has access to see who are the other researchers. We can click on a researcher, we can see their information in JSON. Pretty good, you know. And then we can also do similar for the grants. So we can see all the grants that are in the system. We can also see which, you know, grants are allocated for a particular trial. So like in this case, you know, trial ID is null. So this one hasn't yet been allocated for a trial. So that's some pretty good information for us to know. Those are still open for certain, you know, disease areas. We can also search, you know, for different patients. So in this case, this is, we can search by username. So like AMD, for instance. So each patient has typical, like the first letter of the disease that they're suffering from. Is like what we use in the username for the patient. So age-related macular degeneration, and we can see all the patients related to that. Similarly, we have search patients by disease. So here are all, you know, patients, and we can, you know, type in a disease like cancer, and then we can see a filter on cancer. So let's say we wanted to log in as the patient now. So what we can do is we can just go back to the landing page, and then we can select the patient role. The patient role, you know, all we have to do is just pass in the username 01AMD1 and the password. And just, let's see what went wrong there. So executing SQL statement where that happens, it looks like it's fine. So let's just, you know, try it again. Guess we'll try again. Let's try it with a different patient actually. So let's do, you know, 2 and this one. Okay, so, you know, we're able to log in with you know, this particular patient. So, you know, the patient has 2 features, functionalities. We can look at their particular trials. Typically, a patient is just going to have one trial. We can click on the trial and we can see the information of the trial. Patient can also look at watch lists. They can create watch lists. So typically what these are is patients who are interested in tracking other trials and particular diseases related to those particular trials that are related to their own particular trial. So like right here, we can see this particular patient, AMD2, is tracking blood cancers. So if we click that, we can see currently they're tracking one blood cancer related clinical trial. We can click that and we can see that particular clinical trial information. So that's just a bit about the patient. And that's also the end of our demo. So hope you guys, found it pretty interesting, and also, like seeing the logs in the terminal and how the mapping happens for like when we're navigating through the different functionalities of React.js, and it's sending Axio's API calls to Spring Boot, and then Spring Boot, sending JDBC API calls over to MySQL eventually to, get the data back up to the React.js, front end, or, making changes to the database backend. So thank you again.